if we had exigent circumstances. And what I think I heard you say earlier is that probably should be a circumstance that would be called into question if we had a vote, if someone was attending virtually. Could you clarify that?
I can. So if for some reason there was a final action of something on, at the meeting, and the virtual attendee made up that quorum, it could come up that vote didn't count.
What if we already had a quorum?
Then it didn't matter. It doesn't mean they can't vote.
Right.
There's the association's attorney has concerns.
So if the virtual
over that
virtual attendee constituted what would just be the quorum, that probably should be considered tonight.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
If you only had a quorum because you had a virtual attendee, then that would be maybe questionable.
Yes.
Okay.
And really, I think, his concern was more of those, like the Board of Zoning Appeals case, and it's, something of that nature that could, get appealed. That could be something that is brought up. And then also in that same realm, if it's a final action of something that needed an ordinance, like a budget, adopting a budget, or instituting or increasing a rate, that could be questionable. So on the safe side, you would want to make sure the quorum was in public.
Okay.
We've had some discussion about the reply all that you mentioned. If I send out an email to everyone on council, wouldn't that be considered a public meeting?
No, it is not. And so it's once it's replied to, starts that chain. You can send an email out to everyone on council and, give your thoughts on something, but it's when the discussion happens. And, a good practice, so what other cities do is when they are sending out information, let's say to all the council members, they BCC them all. And then that way it kind of makes it hard for someone, someone could reply all, but it doesn't go to everyone.
So if I send out an email to everyone on council and each person replied back to me individually, that's okay?
Oh, each person replied back to you individually?
Yeah, not reply all, but it's getting weedy, I know.
Yeah, that's kind of a gray area.
Okay, we won't do it.
It's a good question.
Okay, thank you.
Ashley, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me come by and introduce myself.
Absolutely. Nicole, do we have other residents?
Yes,
Okay.
there's
Okay.
one. Patsy.
Patsy.
Thank you. Patsy Heineman, 7 Barnacle Road. I would like to say that there's so many topics I have concerns about. I would need a minimum of 3 minutes per topic, but I don't have that, and I won't have it when we go to workshops. My first concern has to do with the STR caps. I hope my house never has to become an STR, but I think the way that I read the proposal, it's heavily biased in favor of people who already have STRs or who can get them before the cap goes into place. I would venture a guess that most of them are people who don't live here, who don't vote here. Maybe the only time they stepped foot on Isle of Palms was when they bought this business property that they're renting out. As I read it, it says that when a zone reaches its cap, a waiting list would be established and licenses would be issued on a first come, first served basis. Property owners holding a license would have preference to renew their annual license. And finally, when an STR sells, the license transfers. So what happens? Y'all are all young. If you get to be my age and you realize at some point you might be in a position where your house is going to have to go on the market as an STR temporarily or whatever, but there's a cap, so I can't do it. But my next door neighbor that I've never seen, who's had this license for 5 years, they get to keep on renting their house and I don't get to. So it seems to me there's a bias in what's being proposed in favor of people who didn't vote for y'all because they don't live here and against people who already live here. So that's one of my concerns. My second concern has to do really with the changes you propose for council when you want to move to workshops and you want to move to reduce the size of council. I think I've made that clear to you how I feel about that. But the problem is when we sit here, we don't get any feedback. Y'all look like you're sitting there thinking, how much longer before 3 minutes are up? So I can ask a question, I can say things, but it falls on deaf ears. And I think it was within the past month, Sarah Vega spoke, and she asked what I think are some legitimate questions that none of us have heard real answers to. She wanted to know, where is this a problem, these things? Now, some of you have said, oh, my friends talked about it when I was running. Maybe in your small circle of friends, but I don't see the average Isle of Palms household sitting around the dinner table saying, golly, I wish we could get rid of committees and make council smaller. I think if you approach somebody with that idea, they might say, oh, sure, that sounds like a good idea. But I don't think that's foremost in the minds of most of our residents. Now, one of the things that I give credit to Councilmember Anderson is I think she suggested that you wait until after the workshop experiment before you make the next move to reduce the size of council. I commend you for doing that. I don't commend you for your remark in which you said, we're a small community and to find qualified people to make the commitment is difficult to find 9. 7 seems to be a better number for us in that area too, in terms of not having to go too deep into our pool. I felt shocked and offended by that. I think we have a room full of qualified people here tonight and a whole island full of them. So I hope that you don't really feel like we've selected the only 9 people who are qualified on the island. There's a lot many more people. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Oh, anyone else? Sorry.
Kelly
Oh, Kelly, thanks for joining.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for allowing public comment. First, I need to clarify how I'm thinking about the environmentally acceptable packaging and products. I was here last November when it was voted to extend the enforcement of that ban, but the plastic bags were kept in place. So you kept the plastic bag portion at the point of sale. So single-use bags were still banned. Also, you kept the beach portion, the beach ban. So I think what is, and straws in the ordinance are available only upon request. So that's not a cost factor or a supply chain factor. So really all we're talking about here are to-go boxes, right? If I'm understanding correctly, we're talking about to-go boxes here, not the entire ordinance. Okay. So there have been supply chain issues. I've been monitoring this situation very closely. I work with municipalities across the coast on these ordinances and on supply chain. And I understand I've been here for a lot of these conversations. However, I've had many conversations with local managers as well as restaurant owners that have had no problem recently getting these environmentally acceptable products in. And I made contact with a couple of local suppliers. There are 3 main local suppliers in the Charleston, North Charleston area of these products. One would not talk to me because I don't have a membership with them. But the two, the first one I talked to said, no problem, we're getting these in. There are no supply chain issues right now. The second said, it's kind of up and down, but it's across the board. It's not just environmentally friendly products. It is foam, it's plastic, it's paper. So it's just supply chain, right? So there shouldn't be a bias on these supply chain issues. So that's, I guess, what I'm here to talk about today. We are overrun with plastic pollution. We're drinking it in our tap water and in our bottled water. We're breathing it in when we literally take every breath. It's dust in the air. We have to get a handle on this. And I'm asking for council to, as we go into busy season, and a lot more of these products are going to get pumped out into your island and into the customers. I'm just asking that you ask businesses to do their best to get environmentally acceptable products to-go products. There are many ways that restaurants have dealt with the increased cost. I know that's a concern for some businesses. Tacking on a 50 cents or dollar to-go fee has been very helpful for many businesses. It more than makes up the cost of these increased cost for the products. They could even make some money on that. The customers are okay with it because they welcome the convenience of this takeout service. I have some litter data from the Litter Free Digital Journal. There have only been about 10 litter sweeps on the Isle of Palms this year, but already, and this is 90% beach, 60 retail bags, 282 straws, and 155 styrofoam. So that's just a really small snapshot of what's happening on the island. So this is a problem, and I highly recommend that you do start enforcing this with best practices. Thank you.
Kelly didn't introduce herself. She's with the South Carolina Aquarium. That's all right. Thank you. Cole, is that it?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Next, item 3, consent agenda, approval of previous meetings minutes from our April 26, 22 meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Questions, changes, edits? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Mr. Mayor, may I make a suggestion that in addition to the voice vote, if you just raise your hand and hold them up so Nicole would have time to count them all. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, at this time, I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules of order to have a discussion about item 4E3. That's under Personnel Committee, which is consideration of appointments to Accommodations Tax Advisory Committee and Planning Commission.
Second. Questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, Mr. Bogosian.
All right, the Personnel Committee had a special meeting on Monday, May 23rd, to interview candidates for the Open ATAX Committee and Planning Commission members. There are 4, by the way, they were just the quality of candidates were remarkable. Every time we have one of these for one of these open committees, I'm amazed at the quality of residents that we have on the island. But there were 4 open ATAX committee positions. State statute again requires that the committee have 2 members from the lodging industry, 2 members from the hospitality, 1 member from cultural and arts, and 2 at-large members. We have 2 open positions in the hospitality category, although only 1 applicant for that particular category applied. As such, I would like to make a motion that the following appointments be made. Chrissy Lorenz to open hospitality ATAX position, Barb Bergworth to the open cultural and arts ATAX position, Chaz Akers to the open ATAX at-large position, and Jeff Rubin to open planning commission position.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, John. Sorry.
That's it. Yeah.
So back to our agenda, reports from standing committees. First is Ways and Means. Amy, if you'll put up financial results, that'd be great. Thank you, Amy. So these are city's financial results through April 30th. So we're 10 months into our fiscal year, about 83%. So anywhere where you see a, yeah, Amy, just the one pager. Thank you. So anywhere you see a percentage, if it's 83% on the revenue side, if it's more than 83%, that's a good thing. On the expense side, we're 83 or less on just about everything that we have. So all general fund revenues are running ahead of our prior year. Current forecast for the general fund revenues predict the city will end the fiscal year with significantly higher revenues than expected. Just a reminder for those of us that were here at that time, when we put the fiscal 22 budget together, it was very conservative, given where we were with COVID at the time and coming out of it, and just not sure where our revenues were going to flow. So it's all good news, but we'll be ahead of budget from a revenue and a net standpoint. Our general fund operating expenses are about 6% ahead of last year, but well within our budget targets. Our total tourism revenues, consisting of all accommodations and hospitality taxes, are about $2 million ahead of this time last year, which again just continues a good trend for us from a revenue standpoint. At the end of April, the city has about $31 million in cash deposits. About 3.8 of that are unspent bond proceeds. About $1 million is our unspent federal American Rescue Act money. And about $12 million is restricted for tourism-related expenditures or beach preservation. So real quick, from a project standpoint, Amy, if you'll go to that. Desiree covered this at our Ways and Means meeting last month in much more detail, and it's in the packet for those that would like some more detail on it. But real quick, the two Marina projects from a restaurant standpoint is open. Hopefully you've been able to enjoy the new restaurant down there. They opened the week of May 9th. We've had a couple of private events as well there. So every time I've been by, it's been crazy packed, which is great. Marina dock rehabilitation, essentially we're done with that project, and that'll come off from future updates. I think we have a few punch list items Desiree still left to go, but for the most part, that project is done. Phase 3 drainage, we're doing 2 outfalls at 30th Avenue and 36th Avenue. We started the one on 30th Avenue. The golf course, the Harbor Golf Course, will have work through June roughly. And then we'll need to do some road closures at Waterway and 30th, probably August-ish timeframe. And we'll have social media, website, and Island Eye notifications when we get closer to those dates and finalize those exact dates that we'll have closures at Waterway and 30th, again, August and early September, most likely. Waterway and 36, probably late September and October for that construction. 41st Avenue, still waiting on a permit there. You can see our grant that we have that we use for that particular project. Amy, to the next one, if you don't mind. Comprehensive drainage master plan, a lot of work to date on that particular project. Looking kind of for our next hotspot items, if you will, to have a drainage project. This will be finished by the end of the year, and work will continue between now and year end. Our last project, Desiree mentioned a little bit earlier, underground and utility conversion. Our first project is at 21st and Palm. That'll happen sometime towards the end of this year. We're splitting the cost with Dominion. That was our first identified project with them. We've got a number of other projects that we'll have next in line from an undergrounding standpoint. Questions, comments? Public Safety Committee, Jan. Oh, sorry, one thing real quick, sorry about that. From our minutes standpoint, we have really quick Ways and Means minutes, which Debbie covered financials in greater detail. Desiree covered projects in greater detail. The only other item we have is our next regular meeting will be Tuesday, June 21st at 5 p.m. That's it. Jan, sorry.
The Public Safety Committee met on May 5th, and all members were present. For the fire department, Chief Oliverius reported that he is working with Chief Cornett about sharing public information office. He and the deputy chief Hathaway have met with all other departments to better coordinate activities. I want to commend both departments for working so closely together and coordinating with everyone. I think we need more of that. Working on upgrading the fitness center in the next year. Centers, I guess there are 2 in the fire stations. There's 1 vacancy and 15 applications for that 1 vacancy in our fire department. So we have a very good reputation that is being upheld. Police Lieutenant Forsyth reported that activities included a coffee with a cop, National Drug Take Back Day, a pinning ceremony, and participation in Easter activities at the rec center. In the month of April, there were 13 drug charges, 109 traffic citations, and 10 DUIs in April. 3 full-time vacancies, 1 pending in the police department. Still need a couple of summer beach service officers, but they're right on schedule for those hires. So if anyone still needs a summer job, call the police department. And then additional activities were with respect to the South Carolina Department of Transportation. Desiree, our consultant Jennifer Beal, and I met with SCDOT to get a status on our connector study. Data collection is complete. They are developing 8 alternative alignments for the connector. And the committee will narrow that to 3 alternatives that we will bring to the public for your review and comment, probably later this summer. We also, in that meeting, met with County Parks, who offered to place a variable message sign near the Rifle Range Road intersection to show when the county park is full on weekends. Hopefully that'll help people who are coming over to the island that end up not being able to find a parking space, change their mind. They're also working on an app so that parkers can pay in advance, but this is government. It won't be ready before this summer. So, but the good news is they're working on it. We also learned one little piece of information that we hope will also help when the app is developed. In our county park, people tend to park there for a longer period of time than at other county parks. And we think it's because of the way they collect the fees, which is what we've been working on with them. Because you pay for only one fee to stay all day, people stay all day. If you pay by the hour, people tend not to stay as long. So we're hoping we can get both of those changed sometime in the next year, hopefully. South Carolina DOT is also looking at the signal on the island at the connector in 14th Avenue to see if timing improvements can be made there. So we might get that soon as well. And then in addition to that, the police department is working on updating our noise ordinance, which I think is going to be very timely, so that it's more enforceable, but more will come on that in future meetings. We have a request. Do we do that now? Okay. To approve a mutual aid agreement with the National Park Service. This is one that we've had in the past, and it's really just updating and renewing the agreement that we've had to work closely with the National Park Service on Sullivan's Island in terms of helping out if they need assistance. So I guess I should so move that we approve the mutual aid agreement with the National Park Service.
Second.
Desiree, anything to add?
Yeah, no, this is just a standard agreement that allows the police department to respond in the event of an emergency to the park at Sullivan's Island and establishes the parameters of that jurisdiction.
Is this one that we've had and we're renewing it? Or?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay, the next item, I'm not sure whether we need to vote on this, but there was a motion, we passed a motion to update Chapter 1 of the National Fire Code. And no significant changes were made, but it's just a notice that we have just made it current. So that was done. And then the last item is something that we're going to begin discussing: transportation, parking, and roadway improvement responsibilities among the Police, Public Works, and Planning Commission to better distinguish and coordinate activities among departments. I find that there's sometimes more than one department addressing issues. And so we'll start with the police department and have them define what they see as their responsibilities, and then hopefully have the other Public Works and the Planning Commission also define their responsibilities so that we can better coordinate among the departments. And I think, the next meeting. Our next meeting is Thursday, June 2nd at 10 a.m.
Questions? Thank you, Jan. Public Works.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Public Works Committee met 3:30 Wednesday, May 4th. We had department reports, Director Pitts said garbage collection and yard debris collections are both down a bit for April. 42 tons of miscellaneous garbage was taken off the island. Vehicle maintenance was $4,300 in April. An additional 100 feet of Moby mat was installed at 42nd Avenue. The Moby mat at 9th Avenue was removed and reinstalled. New cedar fence was installed at the golf cart path at the Carmen Bunch Park. The compactor pad and recycling area has been cleaned weekly now. Bait stations for the rat traps have been set around the perimeter of the area. Staff continues to work with Mr. Jones on the best alternatives for keeping the area cleaner and rodent-free. Old business, we had an update on phase 3. We've already discussed, the mayor has discussed. Item B, update on installation of improvements to golf cart path along Ocean Park Plaza and intersection improvements on Ocean Boulevard and Jesse Long Boulevard. Director Carter, it reported that the contracts for these projects have been executed. And I just heard from Desiree that the curb cut at the golf cart path on Ocean Park Plaza will be starting on Thursday. Shouldn't take more than a couple of days. So I'm very happy about that. It's been a real safety issue. So thank you, staff, for working so hard to get this implemented. Item C, discussion and request from the dinghy to relocate the existing compactor located at small municipal parking lot. We're still monitoring the effectiveness of the rigorous cleaning regimen in this area. We had a new business presentation status update on phase 4. The mayor's already discussed. Miscellaneous business, the next meeting of the Public Works Committee will be held Wednesday, June 8th, 2022 at 3:30 p.m. There is my report.
Questions, comments? Thank you, Jimmy. Recreation Committee, no meeting in May. Kevin, you want to say something though?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we, as a committee, we decided since it was the start of the rec committee's busy season, we decided to skip May meeting. And we don't have anything posted yet, but my guess is our next meeting will be June 6th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Personnel Committee, John?
All right, we have an active Personnel Committee report. The Personnel Committee met on Tuesday, May 3rd. All members were present. There's no old business under new business. The committee considered the nomination for the newly created Spirit of the Island Award. The nominee's application for the award is included in the packet, but he is a long-serving citizen that has given back tremendously through his efforts with the Exchange Club. So I would like to make a motion to award the Spirit of the Island Award to Jim Thompson.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
So we
Opposed?
opposed. We have an award here that I believe that we'll be presenting to Mr. Thompson sometime this week, I believe, or Thursday at the Exchange Club.
Our inaugural winner.
Yes. Sure. Second item under new business is the committee discussed having a referendum in the November 2022 election to ask citizens if they want to reduce the size of council from 9 members to 7 members. This is something that was brought up and debated with the previous council during 2021. In order for the question to appear on the November 2022 ballot, City Council would need to pass 2 readings of an ordinance, so the question could be delivered to the Charleston County Board of Elections by the mid-August deadline. So the Personnel Committee wanted to bring this discussion to council, really to have the following discussion and on the matter. One is their general interest in for the Personnel Committee to work on a draft ordinance that they would bring to the June council meeting for a first reading. Second is their interest, if there is interest, should the referendum be binding or not? The draft ordinance from 2021 was not binding. And the third item that we would discuss and need some direction on is how would the reduction be phased in? If I interpret the last draft correctly, the full reduction of 7 members would not occur until 2027. So I would like to open it up for discussion around those three items.
And first one, John, is
Is
if
there
there's just
interest?
general interest.
Is there interest?
Yeah.
If there is interest, then addressing should it be binding and how to phase.
And we,
Since my opinion has already been expressed, I'll repeat it again. And that is, I think we should wait until we see how this workshop effort works before deciding on what we do with the size of council. So be postponing it until the next election cycle because for that reason.
Yeah, I have one comment. I think that this has been a subject and topic that's been in the community for years, nearly a decade. And I think it being brought to the residents to decide is the best possible outcome. From a voter participation standpoint, we're not going to have a higher turnout for the next several years than we are probably in the coming election. So I would like to see that this be brought to the residents during this year and that it be binding, and that I believe that we will have the highest voter participation on the topic, which is what I think we need to reach a decision.
Katie,
Yeah, I definitely, based on public comments and talking to people, I think it's a great idea to put it to a vote. I mean, just let the voters tell us what they think, because, you know, we're hearing from certain people one way or the other, but we're not hearing from everybody that's voting. So I don't see any downside to moving forward and allowing it to go to a referendum. I feel like that would be the best way to get an answer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too am in favor of taking this to a referendum and it being a binding referendum. With that, we had a lot of discussion about this particular subject over the last really year and a half, and then it came up last year and it's being moved forward. And then, of course, it got defeated at one point there. But part of that too, I think, with it being positioned as a non-binding referendum, didn't sit very well with people either. I think we have an opportunity, if we get this on a referendum, to go ahead and allow the public to weigh in on it prior to the referendum, to get better educated on the subject prior to the referendum. And I think we let the people speak on this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since 1953, we've had standing committees and we've had 9 people on council. So now all of a sudden we're thinking about changing. I brought this up again, so I'm repeating myself. I must be living on a different island because I've lived here for 37 years and nobody's come up to me and said, council's too big, you need to reduce it. And nobody's had said to me, get rid of standing committees. And it didn't come up until we talked about it last year when we brought it up a few times. And by the way, it got voted down. I watched the personnel committee and Ms. Hyman stole some of my thunder. So the only thing that's worth repeating was what Ms. Vega did ask. What problem are we trying to solve by reducing the size of council? I just thought that was a great question and had to repeat it. The other thing I noticed by watching the committee meeting was it finally occurred to me, and I'm a little slow sometimes, that why we were changing, getting rid of committees and going to workshop. Well, the answer is the next step was to reduce council from 9 to 7. So less council members mean more committee meetings. So they're sort of wrapping themselves together. So I have 3 questions. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this now? And whose idea was it? I'd love to have on the record. Was it an individual on council? Was it 2 individuals on council? Was it staff? I really would like to know where this is all coming from, if I can get an answer. And just to be clear, I'm not against referendums. I voted into it for the Marina, against the Marina, and for the connector. So I'm not against a referendum at all, but I am against reducing from 9 to 7. Thank you.
John, I know y'all had some conversation and there were some stats. You want to take any of that, or I can take some of it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I know in the personnel committee, you know, and Stephanie's gone, or Ashley's gone, the MASC, I think it's, I'm going off memory real quick, but I think it's like 98% of the municipalities across the state have 5 or fewer council members, 7 or fewer council members, thank you. So it's not about being right or wrong, it's just about changing the way you do business to some extent. And so, Kevin, specifically to your question, we're way out of step with what others are doing. That make it right or wrong? Absolutely not. But there are 98% of the municipalities in this state that are doing it a different way. There must be something to that. So this was brought up, to Scott's point, first time probably 7 or 8 years ago from a council standpoint. I brought it up about 1.5 years or so ago and started that conversation. I brought it up again. So that's where it got started. And I started the whole conversation on workshops too. And it's really about, if you've read some of the Island Eye information, or if you've read some of the products we put out, I don't have an agenda. It is about making things more efficient. Having sat in this seat now for about 5 months, I'm shocked at how much time Desiree and staff and now myself spend getting 8 people up to speed on whatever's happening. It's just not efficient, in my opinion. And the committee meetings, again, you've seen the numbers, our staff spends anywhere from 6 to 8 hours per meeting, prepping, attending, and following up, times 6 committees. It's just not efficient from my view. And again, does that make it right or wrong? Definitely not. But I think, from a workshop standpoint, we've said, let's try it for 6 months and see what happens. We'll tweak it, we'll change it, we'll kill it if it doesn't work right. The referendum, to me, on going from 9 to 7, I see absolutely 0 downside in putting that out for a referendum to let our residents speak. We're not voting on it. All we're voting is to take it to a referendum, to John's point. I see absolutely no downside to that, and let that once and for all be the decision point. So again, why the changes? Why are we doing what we're doing? To me, it's about being more efficient as a body, as a staff, and we have 92 employees, and there's only so many hours in the day that folks can do something. And a lot of those hours, if you pass by City Hall regularly, Desiree's car is here quite a bit, and this is not all on her. This is department heads and everybody. I think there's some pretty good excitement from staff around trying this committee structure. Let's give it a shot for 6 months. We'll tweak it as we go forward. Again, if it doesn't work great, we'll move back to the committee structure. But so, Kevin, was that who, why? Was that? I just want to make sure I'm answering what you're asking.
That's fine.
Okay.
Can I add to that, Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
Uh,
Oh, sorry. Let me let Jimmy.
Okay.
Yeah, we need to let everybody comment for a second. Comment. Couple of things I'm writing down, things I've been thinking about for a long time. To Kevin's point, no one's approached me about, not one single person has approached me and said, we need to reduce the size of council. And I have nothing against the petition. I think petition should come from the people. All it takes is 15% of the registered voters for it to be a legal petition presented before council. If it was 10% or even less, that I saw a petition from registered voters on this island, then I would support the petition. When the city gets involved and starts promoting referendums, it doesn't really turn out too well for the city. Just think about the last Marina referendum. If you think about that, I'm hoping that the council can say whatever they want personally, but the city will stay out of the referendum. It looks like this is going to go forward no matter what we say anyway. And we're talking about 98% of the municipalities in South Carolina. It really doesn't matter to me. I don't care what anybody else does. I think that Isle of Palms is very unique. And one final point, I was freshman and just got on council back when Hugo hit in 1989. And I can tell you, your job changes a lot. I hope we never have to go through that again. You don't sit up here, you're out in the field working, and you're working hard. You have council meetings every single day. When you have a catastrophe like that, We had 9 council members at that time. 2 of them disappeared. We met every day over at the Lutheran Center, every single day. And a lot of us were commuting back and forth. I was commuting back and forth every day from Columbia. We could have used 19 council members to get the work done. And so that's about all I have to say about it. I'm definitely not going to support it. I don't think that it's a really good idea. I think we're a unique island with our own unique responsibilities, our own unique opportunities. And I would just love to see a petition from the registered voters. I haven't seen anything. No one's mentioned it to me at all. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Point of clarification, this is not a new subject. I know I wasn't around 7 years ago when it first came up, or for that time, but I did see the minutes in regards to that. We started talking about this really 2 fiscal years ago. Basically, 4 of us on this council were there when we talked about it at first in a budget workshop as an idea. And we were looking at ways that we could be more efficient. And it came up then. I think we had a good bit of discussion about it. It didn't really go anywhere at that point until our former mayor brought it up last year. And then we had some more vigorous discussion about it. And then it was defeated shortly after that. So it's been a subject out there for a while. It's not something that just came out of blue air or blue sky.
I like air better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Blair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know the answer to 7 versus 9. Most of the people that I talk to don't know the answer to 7 versus 9. And one of the reasons that they don't know the answer is because they don't have the information necessary to make an informed decision. So I would suggest, if we're going to move forward with this, that we set up an open meeting structure where residents that are interested can come and can talk to council members, and we can get some discussion and understanding as to all of these issues and why 7 is better than 9, or maybe it's not better. But I think what we need is information both on this council and with the public so that everybody understands and can make an informed decision. Thank you.
Sorry, go
Oh,
ahead.
yeah.
Sorry.
So I'd like to say that I first got interested in this when doing a review of the board I hired a woman to help the board for the elementary school. And the first question she asked me was, how many board members do you have? And I told her we had 15, and she laughed at me. She said, that's way too many people. It's inefficient. It's so much harder to get things done. And so I started thinking about it from that perspective. And then I started asking questions of other people who are on other boards. And the resounding answer was that fewer people is more efficient. And then I heard that there was discussion of changing council and then so knowing that, and then hearing that almost every other municipality has fewer than we do. That was how I got interested in it. So it wasn't, there wasn't some other person somewhere else who told me to do this. And I just want to let everybody know that, it was an organic thing that got me thinking of it. So, and again, I think it'd be really interesting to have the residents vote and tell us what they think, one way or the other.
The question is,
Jimmy,
Make sure everybody else gets a chance to speak.
I think everybody has.
With just point of clarification, I think you're looking at a narrow window. You're talking about city councils and town councils. And I've been on the Carter board. I've been representative from the island, and I really enjoy that work. And I'm not sure. I think there's about 21 of us on that board. But Mike Seekings is the chairman and has been chairman for years. And we're out within an hour every month. We got a meeting tomorrow at 1 o'clock at the COG. So there's a lot of committees and governing bodies that we need to look at instead of just the council. I think that's the Carter is one example of a really efficient, large board. Thank you.
So,
Scott.
so is the next step, do we need to make a motion to decide whether or not we're going to the next step? Okay.
So John, go
But the
ahead.
question is do we have enough interest to move forward? It sounds like there's interest there to at least move forward to put our ordinance together at the next personnel meeting and bring to council in June to vote on. So that's the direction that we'll take.
Do we need to have the conversation about the binding or?
It sounded like everybody I heard, so I talked about it, that it would be a binding.
I mean, yeah, there's obviously already an ordinance drafted from 2 years ago when we looked at this. So I think back to personnel committee to come back with what you heard tonight in a draft, and then we can bring it back.
But the 2 years ago was not binding. Is that
Correct.
correct?
That's correct.
That'll be,
Last year.
Or
that'll be
when?
an easy change. Yeah,
So we don't need a vote tonight.
do not. Just a discussion item.
Okay. Very
Go
good.
back to personnel.
Thank you.
The last item that I'd like to mention is, again, on the open ATAX committee, that there still remains one open hospitality position on ATAX. The city is still accepting applications till the end of the month. If there are no additional candidates that apply, then the committee will consider the candidates that were interviewed but not selected at the June meeting. The next personnel meeting is 9 o'clock Tuesday, June 7th. That concludes my report.
Thank you, John. Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Rusty, real property?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Real Property Committee met 1:30 PM Monday, May the 9th. And all the committee members were present. And we also had staff present in the form of Administrator Fregoso, Director Carr. We had citizens' comments from one citizen speaking on behalf of the VFW Post 3137 and came before the committee to thank us for the recent donation via the ATAX committee. And the $15,000 of ATAX funds was used to build a permeable brick walkway and courtyard at the VFW. Project, the total cost of the project was around $60,000, so we contributed about 25% of that. There was a grand opening celebration on Saturday, May the 14th, which a number of us attended, and it was very well attended and very much appreciated. We had no Marina tenant comments. We had no old business on real property. The update on Marina Dock Rehabilitation Project and the update on the Marina Restaurant renovation. Marker 116 has already been done last week at Ways and Means. Yes, and tonight at City Council, so I won't go into that. Update on the proposed public dock and green space at the Isle of Palms Marina. Administrator Fregoso said construction for this project will begin after the season ends. The city has executed a contract with Davis and Floyd for the assessment of the bulkhead. There's been a lot of people taking advantage of that dock already. Go down there pretty much any time in the afternoon and even the early morning, you'll see a number of people down there. So there's a lot of interest in it. Desiree also shared the web pages on the city's website advertising the Isle of Palms Explorer series. The city's doing that in conjunction with Coastal Expeditions, and I understand that there's waiting lists now, on this first series of expeditions and that they will have with citizens, and that's open to primarily residents. If it's not filled by all residents, I understand that an off-island person could attend, but they'd have to pay the full amount of the fee. The schedule and details of each offering, as well as the ability to sign up, they're all on the city's website. We also, in regards to the public dock and green space, we discussed the request for 2 handicap designated spots at the public dock. And at the time that we were meeting, we were going to look into this through the police department and see if we could get some appropriate signage for the 2 spots. Then we later found that, that this has to be really fully ADA compliant before we can move forward. So we will be doing our work. And Desiree, I'm not sure if we can have, I'm not clear as to whether we can have temporary signs or not at all. My takeaway is that we can't at this point.
Yeah, we asked Stantec, our traffic engineer, to help us identify whether or not the existing conditions would allow for ADA compliant handicap spaces there throughout the season before we go through the planned improvements. And unfortunately, the surface does not, would not meet ADA compliant requirements. Therefore, we'll just continue to work with Davidson Floyd to include it as part of the broader project for the green space.
Okay, and the spots will be compliant, fully compliant, following the work to the dock and green space area, which is set, as I said, for the fall. Update on ADA beach access improvements. I'm pleased to say, as Desiree reported, the Greenbelt Funding Board has approved the beach access path at 34A, along with 2 handicap spots along Palm Boulevard. This will be a cost sharing project between the city and Greenbelt funds. The next step will be to issue an RFP, secure a contractor, and then issue a notice to proceed for the fall. Also being reported, the beach wheelchair program continues to be very popular. The program will be included in the advertising for the Carter Beach Shuttle, which begins this weekend, basically. So, and again, the wheelchair program has been very popular so far, and we have plans, I think, later on to add even more. Let me skip over noise agreement for a moment and just talk about miscellaneous, and that would be the next meeting of the Real Property Committee meeting, which will be held on Monday, June the 6th at 1:30 p.m. Now, I'd like to go back to a consideration item that we have, and that's consideration of noise control agreement with Marker 116 LLC, which of course is the Marina restaurant. So we'd like to open this up for discussion first. And I think everybody's got a copy of this in their packet. So can we just open this up and start having some open discussion about it? Desiree, would you like to speed that up a little bit?
Sure. So the city's noise ordinance, which I think the packet includes an excerpt of our current noise ordinance. It essentially establishes a regulation that prohibits the use of loudspeakers or amplified sound devices to be operated outdoors. This was included as part of an amendment that council approved back in 2016. However, at that time, the city council included in the ordinance an exception to those properties that are under lease with the city and have a noise control agreement, which is what you have in front of you. The development of the noise control agreement was really a process that took about a year, maybe a little bit more, and it came about as a result of issues and complaints regarding the outdoor music from the previous restaurant at the Marina, Morgan Creek Grill. Residents from adjacent neighborhoods were complaining that they could hear the outdoor music inside their residences. So I think at the time, the city spent a lot of time working with Morgan Creek and the residents to develop some type of compromise. And the development of this noise control agreement was the result of that. This was discussed with Real Property late last year as part of, the process to get the restaurant operating again. We provided to our new tenants the copy of the noise control agreement that was in place in 2016 and was in place without any issue until the end, until the closure of Morgan Creek Grill. And they came back to the city with some proposed changes, which you have in front of you. They're shown in purple in your in the document in the packet. Essentially, what the noise control agreement does is ensure that the tenants will comply with the noise ordinance. It also requires the tenant to maintain and employ noise abatement measures. At the time in 2016, that was mainly done through the installation of that band shell that you see in what used to be the sandpit area. Now it's a beautiful kind of patio area that the current tenant is maintaining and plans to use. And it also establishes sort of an enforcement mechanism by which the city has the ability and the tenant has the ability to make corrections to the sound levels should issues arise. So subsection C of that noise control agreement establishes what needs to happen essentially. So residents complain about being able to listen and hear the noise inside their residences. They're notified, and then they're required to immediately lower the sound levels. As you can see, some of the changes that they've requested to you all to consider to amend this noise control agreement creates a little bit of a higher threshold for them to meet before sound levels are corrected. It essentially asks that no less than 3 different residents from adjacent neighborhoods would need to complain before the city would then require them to lower the sound levels. So essentially, that's the biggest difference between the agreement that was in place since 2016 that was really helpful and seemed to mitigate the issues with the noise and outdoor music and the adjacent residents. But before you all is some proposed changes from the new tenants that you all would need to consider. This, the Real Property Committee last year did approve and recommend the execution of the original noise control agreement. So when it was presented to council at the time, the restaurants Marker 116 requested for additional time to be able to review it, run it through their attorney and make changes. So those are the changes that are before you all. This is something that would need to be in place if the restaurant wants to have loudspeakers and amplified music outdoors. If they do not plan on doing that, they do not need a noise control agreement. The only thing that this allows them is to be able to have loudspeakers and amplified music. Hopefully that tees it up.
Hang on one. Let me just give you a quick comment from the committee,
Yeah,
just kind of the conversations.
yeah,
and
this-
then I'll
this-
come to you.
Thank you. This came before us at Real Property, and of course, Kevin, Katie, and myself had a good bit of discussion about this. And we decided as we went through this that it really was a major council decision that we, that needed to be had here. That wasn't something that we wanted to come up to vote on in committee, other than to say, let's take this forward and let's present the original noise agreement to full council along with the purple wording that is the tenant's language, and just have that open discussion that we're currently having right now. So Desiree teed it up very nicely, and we want other people to weigh in.
Claire.
This is in addition to the existing noise ordinance that music stops at 10 o'clock Sunday through Thursday and at 11 o'clock Friday and Saturday, or is this different?
This is in addition to that.
addition
So
to-
the noise control agreement establishes that they have to comply with the noise ordinance and everything included in the noise ordinance. All this noise control agreement does is give them the ability to operate loudspeakers and amplify music, which currently is not allowed.
But other places allow for, can have amplified music outside up until 10 PM and 11 PM, depending on the day. But the Windjammer, the Citadel House are two that just come to mind very quickly. And so I'm trying to understand how is that different from the Marina?
The issue is that the noise control ordinance as it stands today limits any noise that causes disruption to a property owner or to a resident at any time of the day. So at any time of the day, if somebody calls the police department and complains that the noise emanating from wherever is disrupting them inside their residences, that would trigger the police department responding and then enforcing.
Regardless of the time. of day?
That is correct.
Okay, that's island-wide.
That is correct.
Okay, all right. The only other question I have is as written, which is also part of our reconsideration of the noise ordinance in general, is it's very difficult to enforce because there's no objective standard as to noise. And so I don't know if it might be better. Well, I'll take that back. If we agree to this noise ordinance amendment as it's done, it will have to be revisited as soon as we change the overall noise ordinance and make it objective, which is what we're currently considering, as I understand it. So I guess the question then becomes, is it better for us to table this until such time as we have the overreaching noise ordinance established?
John.
Well, one question is if they ask for this to be signed because they plan on playing music out there. And if they have, then I think this thing has been debated already with the previous tenant that played music in the exact same location and those citizens that are disrupted by the noise. I don't think it worked fine. I don't think we need to change at this pretty onerous hurdle they put in there with 3 separate residences complaining. It's something that I don't think any citizen would want if there's noise coming and they're being disrupted, that they'd have to have 3 other their neighbors that complain before some action would be taken. So I think it's worked in the past. I don't see any reason to change it from the previous language that was there.
Jan.
Coordination is the word for me tonight, I think. The Public Safety Committee is considering updating the noise ordinance. The Public Safety Committee is responsible for administering noise issues, and we have not even seen this request yet. So the first thing I would suggest is that the Public Safety Committee needs to address this. The second part is, if we do, there is an ordinance that's in an agreement that's in place now. Does that still govern what they can and can't do at the marina?
There is
There's
no,
not agreement.
there's not an agreement.
So there's no
There was.
agreement now.
There was with the previous restaurant, but we would have to execute a new agreement with the new restaurant.
Okay, okay, I understand that. So there may be at least some issue about whether we give them can we give them a temporary agreement based on the one that's already been agreed, or is that too much? But I just think this hasn't been considered properly yet, and we need to do that before we move forward. The third thing I would say is we are all already hearing from the people on Waterway Drive across from this restaurant about all they went through to get to the point of the original agreement for the other restaurant. And they have real concerns about changing it. So we need to take that into consideration before we move forward.
Katie.
Oh, I was just gonna say that I think the original one, I mean, I feel like we need to take an action to sign off on something so that they can have the amplified music if they choose to. But I think this kind of tonight's discussion sheds light on the fact that, or more light on the fact that we definitely need to have a better noise ordinance, something that is able to be enforced. And obviously there are other places on the island that are having considerable amplified music, and we need to address that. So yeah, I definitely think we need to be fair. What's fair for one is fair for the others. So I would think we need to get moving on that.
Just a question.
Yep.
I'd like to ask a question of the attorney. If would you recommend that we take action tonight, or do you not have an opinion?
I don't have an opinion on that. I would just reiterate what Councilmember Myers said about giving them the option. They want to have the option.
Well, that would be a decision. Either we're gonna give them the option or not, right?
Correct. I
Okay.
don't have any position on that.
Okay.
But I think if we don't vote, then they don't get it. Like, they don't get anything, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
council
so-
can consider approving the original agreement, not including the red line that's proposed by the tenants. And that would put them in the same position Morgan Creek Girl was for the last 3 years that they operated, where there seemed to be issues had seemed to be mitigated. And then you can wait until the Public Safety Committee and council make some decisions on the noise ordinance in general,
And then whatever changes would apply to the noise control agreement would have to be considered. But if there is no action today, then they are not able to have any loudspeakers or amplified music outdoors because they do not have a noise control agreement in place.
No, I've already spoken.
I didn't know that answered your question. Blair and then Kevin.
So this agreement you view as being more restrictive than the overall noise ordinance for the rest of the island?
No,
No.
it gives them an exception that currently the ordinance doesn't give any other business on the island.
Not as written. I mean, even with the old agreement, you think gave them an exception that other businesses did not get. The old agreement did.
That's
You
right.
believe?
And because it's on city-owned property.
That's the only distinction, that the code gives an exception to those properties that are on city-owned property and have a lease with the city.
Right.
Which essentially just applies to the restaurant.
Okay, that's troubling. From a legal perspective.
So I kind of agree with John that, and Katie, that we need to make a decision tonight. And it seemed like the old existing ordinance was working for the last tenant. So it seems like it would work with this tenant, especially since all three of them are residents here. So I'd like to make a motion that we just stay with the original noise ordinance. Second, that existed.
And I think you meant to say noise control agreement.
No. Noise control
I think that's what
agreement.
he said.
I think so.
That's where he zoned out on us. Questions, comments?
Can I just
Okay.
ask a question?
Sure.
This might be really nitpicky, but when you were originally talking about the original versus their suggested amendments, you said purple, but there's some red writing also.
The red are from us. It just updating a few things because the first one was the first one. And it said that the tenant would install noise control abatement measures, and we're changing them to they will maintain those. And there was a typo. It said policy, it should have said police. So the red ones are ours. The purple ones are the restaurants.
Awesome. Good to know. Thank you.
So
That
I
makes
think
so
you
much
all
more
want the
sense.
reds.
Yes.
Want the red in?
Yeah, you want the red.
Other questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Hey.
Marion, ends my report, Mr. Mayor.
There you go. Next item is 5, reports from city officers, boards and commissions. Board of Zoning Appeals minutes are attached. Planning Commission minutes are attached. Douglas, you have an update for us around the short-term rental discussions you all have been having?
I do. Thank you, Mayor. As you all know, the Planning Commission has been analyzing the issues of short-term rentals. They've spent a lot of work, probably 6 months or more, probably, looking at the trends, identifying what issues have arisen. They have created, with a lot of help from Councilman Pierce, a tool that kind of put together the county's assessment data along with our licensing data, and allowed the Planning Commission to kind of look over time a bit and look at density in a way that we haven't previously been able to do in terms of the number of bedrooms and the location of these rentals. So it's been an enlightening process. They're nearing the end of that process. I think that they will have a final recommendation for you all at their June 8th meeting, at their next meeting. And I think they'll look to have a workshop with this group to kind of give to you all of the information and explain their recommendations to you at that meeting, at that workshop. As just kind of a heads up, what I believe they're going to recommend to you all is going to be a program that's very similar to what Kiowa has successfully implemented there. And it is a system that establishes a maximum number of short-term rentals in areas that are currently have a low number of rentals. So this program would exempt areas that have a fairly high number of rentals along Ocean Boulevard, Palm Boulevard, condominium complexes, Palmetto Boulevard, and Wild Dunes and commercial districts would be exempt, but all other areas would have a new maximum number of short-term rentals established in there, which we are calling a cap. Their thought so far is to establish that maximum number or cap at 10% above our current most recent year of that number of rentals in the most recent year. So it gives a little bit of room for, I guess growth is a bad term because it would be kind of a shuffling of numbers potentially, but it would allow some wiggle room and movement of rentals, but it should really lock in the number of rentals over the long term closely to what they are today, plus a little bit additional room. So there's more to come. And again, we'll reach out and try to organize a workshop between the Planning Commission and you all sometime mid-June. Hope to have you something in place or recommendation in place for your June council meeting. Happy to answer any questions, or we can wait till they've finalized a recommendation.
Katie?
Just based on comments I'm hearing from citizens, is there a way of making some sort of, or have y'all discussed having some sort of exemption for, say, a resident who's owned a piece, resided in a piece of property for a certain amount of years that, would want, so it's obviously not someone who's coming in from the outside and using this as a business opportunity, but someone who's using it as a, means to keep the house situation.
Yeah, I would say that along the Planning Commission has discussed that point and not really the longevity of the person living there, but the Kiowa model does not actually transfer the license. If somebody sells a house, that license doesn't transfer, and the first person on the wait list would get that next license. That was the original draft that the Planning Commission looked at. And I will tell you that was kind of the loudest objection heard from the kind of business community, the people that are in the business of short-term rentals. If I had to kind of summarize why the Planning Commission changed their recommendation or is looking at changing the recommendation, it was 2 points. First, I think that they felt like it would damage the potential for the plan to survive, seeing kind of the pushback that it was generating was the first issue. Second issue, they talked a little bit about, that at the end of the day, the migration of rentals is really what causes grief for the neighbors. It's when a new rental comes into their neighborhood. That seems to be what generates the concern. And I think their thought was, if you have a long running rental and that property continues to be a rental, that in the long run is less disruptive than that property going off the rental program, and a new property that could be back in these neighborhoods comes on the program. So there was some thought given to it, but it was actually a point that they changed course on.
So this is just for clarification or anything else. Currently, you're looking at, if you have a short-term rental license, that you would have the ability to continually renew that year to year.
That's correct.
Regardless of however many people. are
That's
renewing
correct. Yeah, the current holders of rental licenses would be kind of the first given the opportunity to renew those licenses. If they choose not to, that rental license becomes available and kind of put back into the pool as long as the cap is not met. But your understanding is correct. Each year there would be a renewal process, and those with the current license would be given first options at those licenses.
I don't know whether we want to get into this tonight, but I'm thinking I want to go out and get a short-term rental license, even though I never rent my house, because it adds value to my house that nobody else on my street could have. Is there a requirement that I actually rent the house?
The way it's currently written, there is, yes, and this came from discussions with, again, with Kiowa concerning kind of the artificial inflation of the number of rentals, people doing what you're saying and going and getting a license to try to kind of protect themselves. But the Kiowa ordinance requires that there be a certain level of rental income made, or at least a concerted effort to rent the house. The threshold in the code currently is considered to be $3,000. So it's, it's not a tremendous amount of rental activity, but that people with no intention of ever renting would potentially be denied the ability to get a license or renew a license in the event of a cap. I mean, if you've met the cap, and I will also just say for what it's worth, Kiowa talks very highly of, and how easy the process was, and that it's been a relatively painless thing to implement. However, they've never met the cap. So obviously the friction comes when we actually meet the cap. So some of this is kind of untested. And I would also say that part of the Planning Commission's review revealed that the number of rentals is actually going down currently. So I think that the thought there is, while the pressure's low, kind of draw the line in the sand. We don't think that it will be, a tremendous upheaval in these communities, but for the long range planning, this limit is out there. Kind of hope you don't need it and that the number stays stable or reduces slightly. But it would certainly keep, or it would answer the concern that some people bring up that, what's going to happen if my entire neighborhood goes rental. It would keep that from happening.
Would it be worth it, and I don't know what the right answer is, Douglas, but maybe talk to Kiowa and maybe ask them why they decided not to let the property inherit the license? Because what happens, I think, and I think some of the comments that were made earlier, if the license is attached to the property, then the new property owner essentially cuts the line to get their business, to get their license.
That's correct.
And their ability to rent the property versus somebody who's been waiting in line to rent their property. So, I mean, maybe it's just worth having that conversation.
Yeah, we could certainly do
and
that.
How they dealt with it with their, if they're getting pushback, where do they get the pushback versus where are we getting the pushback?
Yeah, that's of all the complexities of this thing. I mean, it is interesting, but transferability seems to be a big question mark for people. So we could, I think it'd be a good idea to talk to them about that.
Kevin, do you have a question?
No.
So I'll just say thanks, Douglas. You and I've had a lot of conversation on this. I feel it's critically important. And the committee's done a good job to get it to this point. I do question, and I look forward to the workshop. I think we can debate some of these things, but I do feel like some of the areas where you have the uncapped are questionable that I'd like to talk about. And this transferability issue is still something I don't necessarily see the rationale for it not being transferred with the property. So we'll talk at the workshop though.
Good.
I'd suggest that the committee also talk to a lawyer about this transferability issue. I mean, I see some potential equal protection issues with that. And I don't know that it's legal to do what you're suggesting. It concerns me. I think we ought to get an opinion on that.
We can do that.
Yeah, so Douglas, again, next steps are,
So we have, the Planning Commission has their June 8th meeting, and then after that, assuming that, I think that they were very close at their last meeting. So assuming they finalize their recommendation June 8th, we'll be looking to have a special meeting with you all mid-June. You pulling your calendar out?
well, I was just wondering if we could make it part of Ways and Means and just do it there. But
We can do it right before.
Yeah, because we'll see where you guys get in your meeting.
Yep.
And then go with that, all right?
Okay, that sounds good.
Any final questions, comments?
I have one, just for clarity, Douglas, I understand that when Kiowa implemented this gap, it did not materialize having like a superficial increase of licenses of people doing, I guess, what some folks are thinking about or may happen, or that didn't happen.
That's
at Kiowa,
correct. Did not happen. We, across the hall, they're saying that there have been a few, and not knowing if the ordinance is going to have this requirement that you have to have it legitimately offered it for rent or rented it. I don't know. I think that probably has kept the numbers down a bit.
Douglas, thanks. for
Thank
your
you.
effort. Yep, I know it's been a lot of work. Next, Accommodation Tax Advisory Committee, no meeting in May. Environmental Advisory Committee, no meeting in May. Reports from special or joint committees, Accommodations Task Force minutes are attached. I know there was a meeting today, and Rusty, you want to give a quick update?
Yeah.
Before you do that, big thank you to Rusty Streetman for leading this effort in time, on time, with a deliverable. So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I'm not going to go through the minutes of our meeting at May the 12th because they are attached, but I will mention that we had a really good brainstorming session during that meeting, and we went over a lot of things to think about in regards to what kind of recommendations we would ultimately make to city council. And we had another meeting today. We've had a total of 5 meetings in that task force, and it's been in place actually exactly 2 months. We had our first meeting February 24th, last meeting May the 24th. After today, we'll have no further ATAX task force meetings. We're ready to go forward with some recommendations to council, and we're going to be discussing those next month. They won't be discussed tonight, but I thought it'd be good to make sure that the rest of council had the ideas and the recommendations that we ultimately came up with. And we looked at a number of things. We looked at, what does success look like? And, more accountability, local focus, more flexibility, the use of the 30% ATAX, resident input and how funds are spent, more collaboration with the city, off-season focus, tourism management focus. And ultimately what we did, and we heard from a lot of people too. We had a lot of outside speakers that came in and made presentations. We had great input, from our task force team itself, and we opened it up for resident comments, not about today's meeting, but the last meeting, and had a number of those. And ultimately what we came up with today and the recommendations that we're going to be discussing and making the council, it's 3 things.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor, so I just have a question. I don't mean to interrupt Councilman Streetman, but this is today, correct? I was just had a question about order. Shouldn't they approve those minutes before they're presented to the public or not?
If they're not meeting again.
But these minutes, they need to be approved.
Well, what you have in your packet are the minutes from their May 12th meeting, which were approved today.
Right, I understand that, but I'm talking about the meeting today. I just have a question.
If they need to, I don't know. If they
Somebody
need
needs
to
to
meet,
approve the minutes before they're presented to the public. What transpired in the meeting is my understanding.
Well, to be honest, all of the minutes from your committees have been approved when you guys presented to the public in your city council.
But they
I
are,
see your point. I'm just
yeah,
saying,
but to that point, that's the reason that they are discussed. So when next time we have a meeting, if there's more public input from everybody here, full council meeting, they have, here are all the minutes. And then when at the next meeting, we get them approved after we have all the input from everyone, from the public and all the council members. It's really not that big of a deal. I just want to make sure we're not getting in trouble. I think that it should be approved. That's my only point.
I guess I'm not sure how we close the loop, because if they meet again to approve today's meeting minutes, then they've called a meeting. There'll be minutes of that meeting. So I understand what you're saying. I just don't know
It
practically.
could probably something really informal, like just call it, to talk to the chairman and say, do you have a problem with the minutes? We need to get this closed out. It's just a clerical thing. but we don't make sure that we're covered. So about nobody can come back and say, you discussed things that had not had approved minutes in full council.
You really caught me off guard. I've never thought about that.
I mean, you essentially had approval today in your meeting for your next, for your follow-up item.
Just, you know, I'm
Yeah.
causing too much trouble here. Rusty, go ahead. It's fine.
All right, thank
Just
you.
one more thing, maybe this is a task force, so it's not a committee of council or a
Is it-
standing
it is
committee.
Under a commission or anything?
No, it was
a
just,
task force.
yeah. And they had a specific purpose, and I think that's what Rusty wants to report on.
Yeah, we're not voting on anything tonight. Just
Right.
run through what's.
Yeah, just go through it, Rusty.
All right, thank you. We came away with 3 recommendations ultimately today. Number 1, request more accountability, collaboration, and local focus from the Charleston Visitors Bureau, which is our DMO, our marketing organization. The only one we have existing at this point as a direct marketing organization. So that was the first item. And we have a lot of tactical things that we'll discuss next month in regards to that. Number 2, support the development of the new Isle of Palms Chamber of Commerce so they can act as an alternative direct marketing organization for the Isle of Palms in the future. They made a presentation today. It was a very good presentation. They've got a good plan in place. They're fledgling though. They've only been in place for 4 months. They've got a lot of organization to do, a lot of growing to do, a lot of things they need to work out, but they really seem to be excited about what they're doing and the direction they're going in. And it was quite an impressive presentation today. So what we walked away with was wanting to see City Council really put some support behind the Chamber of Commerce as we go forward and see what that begins to look like over the next year. Then the third item, City Council to advocate for changes to state law to lower the percentage of state aid tax monies that is mandated to be spent only on tourism, advertisement, and promotion. Currently, that's at 30%. We'd like to see some sort of concerted effort. It wouldn't just be Isle of Palms. It would have to be something that would have to be pretty powerful, that you make an effort to go to the state and see if that percentage of state aid tax monies could be reduced in some way. So that was the 3 takeaways today. We'll have much more discussion about it next month.
Great. Desiree, anything to add?
No, sir.
Thank you, Rusty. Item 7, petitions received, referred, or disposed of, none. Item 8, bills already in possession of council. We've got 2, actually. Ordinance 2022-01, an ordinance to raise revenue and adopt a budget for the city of Isle of Palms, South Carolina for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 22 and ending June 30th, 2023.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next is ordinance 2022-02, an ordinance to temporarily suspend all regular meetings of standing committees and replace with workshop meetings from July 1st, 2022 until December 31st, 2022. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Yes, sir.
Question. You had percentages on the size of municipal councils at 98%. Do you have any numbers on how many communities in South Carolina have replaced their standing committees with a workshop?
I do. It's a bit anecdotal, Jimmy, from the MASC.
Right.
Their numbers, because they track council members and a number of other things that we've asked them about on workshops. There, again, it's anecdotal, but it's about 80% use workshops currently.
No standing committees.
Correct.
Okay.
And there's some that certainly use a combination thereof, but
Combinations.
right, but 80% are using workshops today.
You know, Sullivan's Island has 7 and Panama Pleasant is 14. Of course, I don't care what they're doing, like I said before. But okay. Do you have any examples? I mean, could you name them? If you said 80%, to Columbia or Orangeburg, or do
Yeah,
you
we
know,
talked
have you
to
done that?
James Island, we definitely talked to where.
They do
Ashton
that?
is From.
Okay. Okay.
Folly also. there.
Folly.
Situation. Yeah.
They don't have standing committees. Very good. Thank you.
John? you have a question?
My only comment is I think we said this at the beginning that we're going to go into this and we very well likely will not end up coming out of it with the same way we're going in it. There's going to have to be tweaks and modifications to how we get things done. And I think we're going to have to give that more thought. For example, what we just went through with the whole interviewing process of trying to fill open positions. I think at some point we're going to have to figure out how we get that done. I don't think we want to sit in a workshop and do that. So there is going to have to be some more thought of how work is done outside the workshop. And I think we all recognize that again, that there are going to have to be tweaks and modifications in this thing as we go through it, but directionally it's the right way to go. And we'll figure it out along the way over the next 6 months.
Yep.
I personally think the workshop approach is the way to go because we end up talking over the same topic over and over again. Everything discussed in Ways and Means is talked in committee and then brought before council. So that's 3 times right there. So I think it'll take care of some of that. I think we will be having ad hoc committees for things like if there were positions to interview for, we would set up a temporary ad hoc committee that would meet just for that duration and then go away. So we wouldn't be meeting every month for these things, but there would obviously be task force and committees on the side that are probably more temporary than permanent type of structures. The last thing I would like to consider also is that we possibly go so that we have a council liaison person with each of our departments now, if we think it's important. And it's something I haven't really thought a lot about, but I'd like to consider it so that we still continue the relationship with our departments that we have now. But that's something we work out, I think, after we decide.
Rusty.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've had this discussion before, but for the sake of the audience and maybe anybody watching and listening, the workshop approach, I think, could be pretty effective for us because as we discussed before, we pretty much all have busy lives and a lot to do. I'm probably the one that's least busy because I'm retired. And I watch every one of these meetings that we have. Every committee meeting, every commission meeting, I watch them all. Okay, so I'm kind of up to speed on what's going on in those. But there are many of us who, are still working for a living, have very busy lives, have young children, a lot of obligations, and they don't get a chance to go in and look at what's happening at the committee level. And so they're not as well prepared when they come to a council meeting because they haven't had the time to really look at the committee meetings. Maybe they've been able to read some of the previous meetings, meeting minutes, and get a little bit up to speed. But many times they're playing catch up by the time we get to the full council. So I think what the workshop hopefully will accomplish is having all 9 of us there, discussing these strategic items, and as Jan had mentioned also, if we have other things, need to have an ad hoc committee before we even get to that workshop or a takeaway from the workshop, we could do that too. But we will all be in the same room discussing the same priorities and projects at the same time. And I think the agenda that's been put together is a very fair agenda, not only for our staff, but also for the residents to be able to weigh in with input, and also fair for the council here to save them a little time as well.
Yep. Okay.
I just like to say that I think this is a great idea and I really believe that it's going to work well. And I would like to ask that everybody just give us 6 months to see what happens. If, just give us time to see if it works and if we like it. And we're not, changing anything forever. And just bear with us, and we will all try to bear with each other during the process, because it is going to be a process.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
That's item 9, introduction of new bills, resolutions, and proclamations. Ordinance 2022-03. An ordinance to extend the temporary suspension of enforcement of the plastic ban for businesses impacted by supply chain issues. So let's have a little bit of conversation before we go down a motion path if we even want to. Just by way of a little bit of a history. So when COVID started, this suspension, to Kelly's point a minute ago, has really been going for about 2 years for IOP. In November, we extended it for another 6 months just due to supply chain issues and supply issues that were going on. Based on feedback from some of our island businesses and others at that time. Desiree sent out a note to the island businesses 2 weeks ago, I guess, just a notification that the ban was coming up for expiration. Some additional feedback from some of the businesses there that, still supply chain issues. And I know, Kelly, thank you for your comments and depending on which supplier you're using, I've talked to a couple of local businesses. I know you all have as well. There are definitely still supply chain issues out there. Now, does that mean we still need to support a plastics ban? Maybe, maybe not, but there are definitely supply chain issues from product they're putting on your table to product that you're taking away as far as a container. There is a provision in our current ordinance that allows for a business to come to council and ask for a hardship situation. So, if there's a business that just can't find supply or can't afford it or can't pass the cost on or whatever, it really kind of puts the onus on the business to have a conversation with council and ask for an exception to be made. So that's out there just by way of information if we wanted to go down that path as well. But again, it's still real. And again, it doesn't mean we have to continue the plastics ban, but I do not want to minimize what our businesses on the island are going through from a hiring, from a cost, from a product availability standpoint. It's a real deal. And I know we're trying to balance good business with environmental concerns, and I totally get that as well. But so that's just by way of backgrounds. We'll just open up for discussion before we get to a motion or vote of any kind if we want it. Katie.
So first of all, based on some people's comments, I asked that there's been a rumor that Charleston County doesn't recycle. And thank you, Desiree, for getting us. We've gotten a letter from Charleston County that they in fact do. And how many tons? A lot of tons.
Last year, they processed 30,000 tons and about 70,000 of compostable material.
So it is happening. That don't listen to people when they tell you that there's no need to recycle. My second point would be, I can't tell you how many restaurants I've gone to very, very recently, pretty much all throughout the pandemic, where I've still managed to get paper takeaway containers. And it took me about 30 seconds on a Google search to find a number of compostable paper containers. They are a little bit more expensive, but they're not that much more expensive, especially when you're buying in bulk. So I think that we passed the ordinance way back whenever it was originally passed. And I think that it's high time that we start make it just the way that it originally was and enforce it. It can be, you can get these proper materials. It's possible. So.
Yeah, wasn't part of the request to extend so that they could use up some of the extra supplies that they had on hand? I thought that was a part of the request we were getting from businesses.
Yeah, one of the comments from one of the restaurants is that the city, if a temporary suspension of the ordinance is not approved, that the city at least gives them some grace period for them to utilize its existing inventory. So that was a request. I don't think you need to pass an ordinance to do that. It would just be operationally, we can do that.
But that was my big takeaway from what I was hearing is that, they had extra supplies on hand and they needed to get rid of that inventory and wanted a break of being able to do that through extension.
Well,
while I'm sympathetic, Rusty, I think if a line is not drawn in the sand, they will continue to have excess product they have to get rid of. Because they knew this was getting ready to expire whenever they they bought the product that they bought.
Well, I was in that business and that's not
Not
the
true.
case.
Okay.
I agree. If we decide to give them an extension, we need to put a date on that extension so that it doesn't go on forever. It's like, oh yeah, I found some more bags. I found some more bags, and they're coming in the back door every week. So
Sorry,
but I
go
would be
ahead.
fine with either way.
I was just going to say, can we just apply some reasonableness, allow them like a little bit of a grace period to work out something? If they got a little residual inventory, let them use it. And let's not, go hard on a date like tomorrow and say you got to stop doing it. Give them a little grace to, but I'm kind of in support of let's revert back to the original ordinance. And, let's just be practical about the implementation of it.
And I think that's a good point. And based on citizen comment tonight, I mean, I think a best effort, on somebody's part. Our police are not standing at somebody's door.
No.
Waiting to write a ticket today on this stuff.
And as you said, we have the hardship provision.
Has there been an ordinance, so has there been a motion made yet?
No, we're just discussing.
I'd like to make a motion for an ordinance to extend the temporary suspension of enforcement of the plastic ban for businesses impacted by the supply chain issues till December 31st, 2022.
Second.
These businesses have stocked. I know a lot of these people personally. Talk with them personally, and they've stocked up for a while when they didn't know when the prices were going to start rising, and they're going through the roof right now. So I would defer to their better judgment. They know how to run their business better than I do. And they've asked me for a couple of them for this extension.
When the exception was originally made, it had a deadline of, I believe it was May 18th. So this is not a surprise. When the exception was made back in October, November, it had a sunset automatic without a vote that it went away. So there's no surprise in here. And I mean, I like I said, I mean, go to any restaurant in Mount Pleasant and just about any restaurant, you get paper to go stuff. I mean, this is, I just totally disagree that this is a huge hardship.
No one else has a comment? I'd like to make one more after everyone has a chance to speak.
Yeah, I'll make a comment real quick. I mean, to me, this is a hard one. I think reasonableness is the key piece here to me. I mean, I talk to business folks. My brother has 3 restaurants in Dallas, and I'm telling you, it is a real issue around supply chain stuff and plus stuff, however you want to, whether it's proteins they're buying or to-go packages they're buying. Katie, I hear you, but I talk to business owners on this island that cannot get sugarcane-based to-go items, period. Not available anywhere, no matter what they want to pay for it. I'm going to trust him. I mean, he sent me a screenshot of his online ordering system and said product's not available. I think a happy medium is good here somewhere. End of the year feels way too far for me. A reasonable happy medium somewhere feels better. Just to let them get their supply out and let them hopefully supply chains get better. I mean, I'd like to make an amendment that we take it through September 30th.
Second.
I'd like to conversation on that. I would suggest that we, the expiration date for the ordinance that's in place, suspension of the ordinance was May 18th,
May 17th.
May 17th. Enforceable beginning July 1st. That is much more, otherwise we get to the end of September and they say we still have stock, but you give them 6 weeks to get rid of what they have. That's an amendment. Should we vote on that and decide whether?
Well, you can present it and you need a
Nobody
second.
made a motion.
Okay, I move that we, I mean, that's why I'm wondering whether we need to vote on Jimmy's first and then come back to mine.
first you need to make the amendment, then you have to get a second, and then you can discuss it.
Okay,
But
so
that's
I
the
move-
procedure.
I move that we have an amendment that we stick to the original expiration date, but state that it would be enforceable beginning 6 weeks later, July 1st, or if you want to make it to the end of the summer, so they can certainly get rid of their.
Oh, we got to pick it. Yeah, pick it.
Yeah, so what do you, make your motion?
Enforceable beginning August 31st, on September 1, I guess, so it's the same issue.
Second. Oh, go ahead.
I'm just a bit confused.
Yeah,
Um,
that makes sense.
Oh, none of us are.
What I
So are we.
Is to change the date.
So, but there's a motion on the table,
Yeah.
3 motions.
Yes.
one motion and 2 amendments.
Correct,
Okay.
but it's a movement of the date.
3 days.
Can I ask a question on Jan's motion? Is your motion to keep we're not going to extend the moratorium, the ordinance, but what we're saying is we're not going to really get into an enforcement position or stance until sometime close to the end of the season? Yeah.
September 1.
Is that what you were trying to say? Okay.
Yeah.
And that was seconded.
Yes.
I seconded that for discussion.
And-
One question.
Just
So,
one?
yeah, we'll have several, I've got a bunch of keep, but, so we got a law, but we're gonna tell the police chief not to enforce it.
Basically. It's-
I think what the actual terminology would be to give a grace period.
Okay, that's better than not enforce it.
Yeah.
Lord. Right.
In other words, since they couldn't accept the hard date that they had, this, we're saying, we really mean the hard date, but we'll give you a grace period.
Just for the sake of cleaning things up, I might make a suggestion and y'all can do what you want. Maybe we should think about voting on the original motion, up or down, and then you make another motion
That's what I was asking.
and instead of these 2 amendments.
I agree with you.
Right, Nicole?
I withdraw my. I withdraw my amendment or whatever it was. Yeah.
I mean, I think it works either way.
Could be a series.
Everybody
Whatever you
votes
wanna
yes
do.
for hers. They vote no for yours, they vote no for his. But
Well, yeah, we gotta do it in
I'm
order.
happy to withdraw mine.
Okay.
Without a doubt.
So all we have left standing is the original motion at this point.
Which is to extend it through December 31st,
Correct.
Yeah, let's vote on that.
2022.
2026, Back to the Future.
I need to withdraw my second to your motion.
yes,
Everybody's withdrawn.
We'll assume
And
that
Scott,
seconds have been withdrawn.
Everything withdrawn. So the motion is to extend the exemption ordinance through 12/31/22.
Yeah, one final comment. Okay, oh, you already called it.
No,
I just, to some people's comments about like, well, you knew this was happening, all this is, they should have planned better or whatever. I disagree with that sentiment because I still think we're at very unusual times these days. Things are not for certain at all. And so I think it takes an unusual look at every circumstance instead of just painting something black or white. Thank you for listening.
is everybody clear on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, oh, I'm sorry.
I think we've 4, Kevin, Rusty, Philip, and Jimmy.
Not me.
Oh,
it's just the 3 that voted in favor.
okay.
12/31.
So that fails.
All those opposed? Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
No.
Aye, nay, nay.
You got it? You got it?
I got it.
All right, Jan.
Everybody else.
Everybody else
Then-
here.
All right, so I'd like to make a motion that we hold the date of the sunset date for the suspension of the ordinance to May 16th, 17th, with a grace period that it would begin to be enforced September 1, which would give everyone the summer to deplete the stock they have.
Second.
Questions, comments? I just don't know as a practical matter, I don't understand how you can do that. I mean, it's like we're saying it without saying it. I mean, we're either gonna we're either going to extend it or we're not. I mean, if we're, I think it's real confusing to the public to say that we're we still have an ordinance, but we're just not going to enforce it. I just don't know as a practical matter how that works.
I think it's happening every day in every city. personally,
But it's
this
usually,
topic.
but it's usually not codified. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, once we codify it, then we are making it. And then we either have a law and we're telling our police to turn their heads and ignore it, or I don't know. I don't see from a legal practical standpoint, I don't see how that works.
So
I mean,
can
you could have a situation where somebody could get fined theoretically, and then they're gonna
Just
back.
extend it, just extend the thing until the.
I mean,
September 1.
I think if that's what you want to do, to me, that's what you have to do. I still don't think we need to do that, but to me, the grace period thing doesn't make sense. I mean,
Okay, so I think the question is, we're trying to solve for, I think we're all on the same page. Let everybody exhaust their current inventory. But maybe that's what we're trying to say is let's let this expire, but allow them to work their existing inventory, not keep buying new inventory. So how do we craft a motion to solve for that? And because if we do a September, if we do a December, pick a date, we're gonna have to come back and vote it all over again. And we're gonna have another request for extension. So perhaps there's a way to say, look, we're gonna discontinue the extension. However, we're gonna allow the restaurants to exhaust their current inventory. And then it's on the honor system for them.
Yeah, I think that's harder to enforce because you won't know. I mean, there's no way to guarantee whether a restaurant is using current stock rather than just continuing to order.
I agree with that. I'm just trying to solve for, let's have the businesses go on the honor system and just see what they can do. I mean, but that way we don't extend this.
I think you're doing
It's
this.
just an idea.
You're essentially doing that. I mean,
Yeah.
you're extending it by allowing it to happen. You're allowing the temporary suspension to be in place. Whether it's September 1st or 30 days from now or 60 days from now, if you are voting on something, then you should vote on an extension if the goal is to allow them to still use it. It creates a ton of gray area for police, for enforcement, for expectations. They're gonna want to know exactly when they can get a ticket, essentially, if they're still using it.
And to Katie's point, I mean, you're codifying them.
Yeah.
I'll amend my proposal then, that we extend the suspension until September 1st. Suspend the ordinance until
You got a
September
motion
1st.
and you got an amendment.
Yeah.
Same person.
So withdraw the one, submit the other.
Are you making a motion to withdraw?
Huh?
Would you like to make a motion to withdraw your original?
Yes.
And then now make.
Okay, and now I'd like to move that we extend the suspension of the ordinance until September 1st.
Second. Questions, comments? Yep, Rusty.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, well, if we do go to September 1st on the extension, I mean, it does give them pretty much the entire high season, to work on, those supplies, those extra supplies that they have. So I'm in favor of doing this.
Just for clarity, Mayor,
Yes.
The exception only applies to those products that businesses can provide at point of sale. It still prohibits the use of these products on the beach.
Correct.
Do you want to continue to require or prohibit this distribution of single-use plastic bags? That was something that was included in the original. Okay, so not including plastic bags. Okay. That was a friendly amendment, right?
Oh, you good. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
No.
good, Nicole?
Yes.
Miscellaneous business. Our next meeting is 6 p.m. Tuesday, June 28th. We have a need to go into executive session pursuant to South Carolina Code 30-4-70A2 for the discussion of negotiations incident to propose contractual arrangements related to the marina.
Motion to enter into executive session.
Second.
Questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.